On behalf of the museum's board and officers and volunteers, the one who welcomed y'all to come this evening, Deb Cornelius is here to share her vast amount of knowledge on the Gilbert family and how they have related into the activities and in days past here in Clay County. So for the next half hour or so, hope y'all will be thoroughly entertained and your brain will get really absorbed with a lot of new historical knowledge that maybe you didn't have before. So Deb, she's a friend of mine from years ago. We taught school together in Burke-Burnett. I know her husband and those two wonderful children. So she's a member of a wonderful family. So Deb, thank you for coming today.
Thank
and we
you.
look forward to learning a whole lot more.
Very good.
Good.
I appreciate it. All right, it's such a pleasure to be here with such a rich historical area. You know, I grew up on Heritage Row in Sherman. I was born in Dallas the first decade of my life, but I grew up on Historical Row in Sherman on South Crockett. And so this home reminds me of the home I grew up in. So, and I'm gonna bring my mom back. But anyway, so again, my name is Deb Cornelius, and today I'm here to talk to you about Rivers and Destinies, a book that I wrote. And so first of all, I like to start off with this quote because it means so much to me. A generation which ignores history has no past and no future. So thank you what you guys do here to preserve the history of Clay County because it's so important. And I just appreciate what you did. What an awesome array of information and history you have. So thank you. And then, so I started researching this in 2017. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes. 2017, I started researching because my husband and I, if you can look behind you, that picture, that's Gilbert Creek on our property in Wichita County, in the middle. And at the bottom, that's the Red River. And so we put in a bridge over Gilbert Creek. I can be on the Red River in 2 minutes from my home. And so I started researching really just about our property first, but I just paused at the beginning because I actually came through here a couple of times when I was researching, asking what you guys knew about Gilbert's, and of course I got to see the wonderful gun that is so awesome, but they said, we don't know that much really about Gilbert, and I said, well, Gilbert Street's right there, and they said, no. So anyway, I'm so excited to share this. And so I started collecting business cards from all those places, and it just became, so when you research it that long, it became overwhelming. So I always start off with all the people that I needed to thank because this has definitely been, they're a part of this journey with me. So why is a girl that's not related to the Gilberts at all, from Dallas, Texas, I graduated from Sherman, Texas, why would she write a novel about Maybelle Gilbert? Which Maybelle Gilbert, Maybelle is a man's name, a very manly man's name. And so I'm going to give you a little information about why I wrote this book. And so you can see those images. That is actually, this is Gilbert Creek. This is me at Gilbert Creek. This is it's like 40 acres between Gilbert Creek and the Red River. And it looks like the buffalo should still be roaming there. And across the river, you can see right here, the hills of Oklahoma. I could just imagine the Indians, riding over that. That was Indian territory. And, the Kevin Costner movie, Field of Dreams, have you seen that? Where he has the corn field and he tears it down and builds it, because he keeps saying, build it and they will come. When I hiked this property, I felt like the pioneer families were saying, tell our story so they will know. And so at first I just started research. Oh, and this is the historical marker. It's not on our property. It's right next door at the Perkins Scout Camp. But I have access to it 24/7. So if anybody wanted to come and go down there, or a group of you wanted to bring a van, come down there, I'm happy to do it. And then on our property too, the springs, and it's just beautiful. You don't feel like you're in Texas at all. I mean, there's hills and beautiful big trees and natural springs. It's just, it's a beautiful property. He knew how to pick the properties. So I first just started researching at county courthouses, at the general land office, just to make sure our property was in fact owned by the Gilberts. And I found out that our property was owned by the Gilberts, the Prescotts, if y'all know the Prescott farm in Wichita County, and now Cornelius is my husband. My in-laws bought it in the 80s. We call our property Full Circle because we lived out there when we were first married. And I'm a Dallas-born girl, not so much a city girl. And as soon as I became pregnant with my first baby and I had rattlesnakes underneath my porch, I said, we're moving to town. And so I just started researching and this is actually a letter handwritten by Mabel Gilbert, trying to find all the data I could find, never thinking I'd write a book. This is actually a receipt from 1839 that he submitted to the Republic of Texas about some reimbursement for some bushels of corn. He was considered the William Penn of the South, very, very close to the Indians. That's how he was able to find this wonderful, wonderful lands that he found, and the water. He knew how important water was. But he also ended up being a Texas Ranger. When our government kept denying Indians and pushing them, and the other bands would come, that's when he did serve as a Texas Ranger for a brief time. But really no military history except for he was a privateer in the War of 1812, and he also, a lot of people don't realize that he privateered for Texas independence too. So this is an example. I've got a Google Doc on our property, and actually when he died in 1870 at 73, he had over 4,000 acres in Wichita County, Clay County, that became Wichita County. And so I have it on all this. This is a hyperlink. It's all his own handwriting. I've done all the research. It's so interesting to me to go back in history and see all that. So this is his land. I don't know if you can see the yellow, but part of the 4,000 acres that he had. And our property is right here, back here, and that's the Red River. That's where it is. So
now, are you in Clay County or Wichita County?
Wichita County. But I'm going to show you when he did the survey and everything. Of course, it was Clay County then, and he did it out of Cook County, and I'll show you that. I think that's the next slide. So yeah, when Clay County was separated from Cook County, December 24th, 1857, the act required that the county seat be named Henrietta. And so in here, it's really hard to see. I'm going to look on mine actually. But this is when he surveyed it, and it does say right here, it says out of Cook County, and it's prior to that 1857, and it has it drawn out. And when do you guys here at the museum, when do you start claiming history of Henrietta? When do you?
73.
Yeah.
After it disbanded, it was reorganized.
Right, and that's what happened in Wichita also. Yeah. And I have a theory about that too, and it might be in my next book. He had some of the richest land through Burt Burnett, through where the 4-6s, the Wagners, where the Hardins had the oil boom. That was all his, and I've tried to go back, all that, and I'll show you what I found at your Clay County. I'll get to that in a little bit. I found this at the Fannin County Museum, and they said this was donated by the Gilbert family, and they said, we're so happy to have it because here's Mabel Gilbert right here. Mm-hmm. I said, oh, no. That's Morris Gilbert, because he got shot in an Indian, he got sideswiped. Actually, it was either Smith or Henry that shot him in an Indian fight. It was one of their bullets, but injured never bothered me. He just kept on going through life. And that is W.C.'s, I guess would it be his grandfather or great-grandfather, Morris Gilbert. And he was the first child born in Dallas, the settlement of Dallas. And when you read my book, you'll find out that Mabel's wife and maybe sister-in-law, Martha Gilbert, named Dallas, Texas. And so 2 weeks ago, if you Google it, Deb Cornelius, Mabel Gilbert, Dallas Morning News, there was an article in the Dallas Morning News about my book and about how now there's lots of talk going around. I'm just trying to plant a seed. I call this historical fiction. It is very historically accurate, but the character development and the dialogue is fictional. And so, and some of the things that I experienced on my property. And so just like that, the names on here are correct. They're all Gilberts. But I believe this to be Mabel Gilbert. That's just from deduction, though. It's just from what I know about the research that I've done. The hat that he has on is described that the Texas Rangers wore, and they were more like the Spanish-style hats. And then the ages of the people. So I'm hoping that someone who's really into Ancestry.com or a family member. And I had someone this week from Louisiana call me and say, I'm from the Gilbert and I bought your book and I'm so Gilbert family, I can't wait to read it. And so I'm hoping someone will say, oh, no, this is Jackson, but this is Thomas. You know, I don't know.
They're all Gilberts?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. But not all his sons. I believe one is his brother and one is his nephew. So but it's all deduction. But the family member that donated it said they were all Gilbert men. So.
Wow.
All right, so I put this in here for WC if he came. So WC is the son of Raymond Gilbert, and it has all the Clay County information. He was not able to be here, but hopefully we're gonna get to have him on camera and talk about some of the stories he may know. And I wish he was here to.
Does it have Raymond's parents? Who was Raymond's dad?
I've got a whole slideshow that shows that, and I have not spent a lot of time. Really, my research stopped when Mabel died. I have not gone into that, but now that all the family members are finding out about the book and coming to me, I'm finding out so much really neat stuff,
What did you ask?
Raymond's parents.
Okay, I think I might have that over there on that chart over there.
Yeah, and she has a book of it right here
Yeah.
too, where I got that information. So I found this. This is from your Clay County. Is it Color Reporter? Clay County Reporter. Yes. And so this is when WC and his family came and donated that unbelievable buffalo gun that I write about in the book. That's right there. I'd really like to hold it one day.
Good luck getting it off the wall.
And I was like, no, I would never try. But I was hoping he'd be here to talk through that. But I know. But I hope, I feel like either if he can't get here, maybe some of the board will go there and have an interaction and have some of that on video, you know, with him. In case he has some neat stories.
Again.
Yes, sir.
You could do this again.
Yes, sir. And I will come back during your Pioneer Days for sure. And then maybe if the spread the word.
Maybe he'll be able to be here. Right?
Yes, maybe so. Maybe so. All right. Lots of people have been as obsessed about Mabel Gilbert as I have. And so some of these are related, some of them not. I'm going to start up here. Tom C. Gooch. Has anyone ever heard of him? He was a philanthropist from Dallas. I think at one point he owned the Dallas Morning News, but he wrote for him a lot. He was obsessed. He is a descendant of Mabel Gilbert. And there's a Tom C. Gooch Elementary School. And I went to their website when I started researching this. And I thought, I wonder if they'll say anything about Mabel in there. And they did. The DISD said Tom C. was related to a great pioneer, female Mabel Gilbert, you know. And I was just like, oh, because he was such a manly man. I mean, he was such a manly man. So that was interesting to me. And I gleaned off a lot of his research. This gentleman, Glenn Rogers, has anyone heard of him before? He's a representative, a Texas, state representative. And I was researching in Fannin County. And it was after I'd written my book, and I had a lot of research that I didn't use. So I have a website with a lot of my research, because a lot of the research I didn't put in here just because at first I was just recording facts. And my husband, I became so obsessed, my husband said, if you are this interested in the story, you should tell the story. And so then when I started, and I've never written a book, you know, I'm a reading specialist by trade, and I did pharmaceutical sales for a while. But I did a training, it was actually out of Great Britain online, about writing historical fiction. And they said you can't get too bogged down in adding a lot of historical facts that you think are fabulous, because you'll lose your reader, your typical reader. And so I devised this website, and a lot of my research is on the website. And when people ask me things, I say, I'll put it on my website, just because there's so much cool information. But he was at the museum, and when I said I'll donate the museum, because they didn't know that much about Mabel Gilbert either. He was just so early. He was such an early pioneer that I feel like that's why the story's untold a lot. And so I was sending it to him, and she said, that's so strange. We just had a man in here asking about Mabel Gilbert, and I was like, what? And I got so excited. I said, give him my name and my number and my husband, my husband's name and number, because you don't want to think you don't know a thing. But he and his wife ended up coming to our property, and he is the great, great, great grandson of Maybelle Gilbert. And he read the book in 2 days. And he was so excited. He says, you have made my family come alive to me. And he said, thank you so much. And now he's doing a lot of genealogy research about it. And he's the one, he writes for the Dallas Morning News on Sunday's paper. And he wrote about who named Dallas and how that happened. And then he mentions my book at the end. But then MC Toyer, he is a famous Dallas historian. And he's been to my property too. My husband said I have a crush on him. He's probably, I know he's in his 80s. But he's a great, not one thing.
I was gonna say.
But I was nervous because I talked in Sherman, Texas, because Maybelle Gilbert had a grist mill in Grayson County, and I was at a museum there, and he showed up. And he'd been to our property, and I consider him a friend, but he is very much a historian. And he came over and I said, you're not going to buy a book. I'm going to give you one. He said, I've already got one and I've already read it. And I was like, and so it was standing room only in Sherman. And at the end he said, can I say something? I was like, oh, here it goes. And he stood up and he was so kind. He just said how I made history come alive. He's all about facts and dates, but because I put the dialogue in there and gave and explained and described the people, and he just was very kind, and I was like, so thankful. But he was key in my research too, and he is a Beeman and a Bryan. So John Neely Bryan is really the founder of Dallas, but he recruited Maybelle Gilbert. So any of you who've been downtown Dallas, I'm going to talk a lot about it, to that log cabin. That's where Charity that's a replica, but that's where Charity had Morris, the first baby of Dallas. They also had the first baby in Wichita County, which was Clay County at the time, on our property, Hetty Gilbert, and I'll talk about her in a minute too. But another person who wrote for the Dallas Morning News is Vivian Lou Castleberry, and she wrote about, she was very interested in Maybelle Gilbert and Charity Gilbert, because they sailed in on a cottonwood raft. Charity was pregnant with Morris, and had all these other little children, and they sailed in on the Trinity River to find Dallas. So she and Mabel did, but John Neely Bryan went by horseback. But A.C. Green, if you remember him, he was obsessed and wrote a lot about Maybelle Gilbert. This James Morphus, he was an attorney and traveled to the Dallas area and wrote firsthand after visiting about how Dallas was founded. So I put a lot of his research in my book. And then Susanna Kelly, she wrote the book Wichita County Beginnings. If any of you have ever read that book, she was obsessed with Maybelle Gilbert too. And so it's such an interesting story that there were a lot of people that did a lot of work before I even did. So I said I started researching in 2017. I probably started writing during COVID. That's when my husband said, you might as well do it. And I was hiking the property so much then. So then I started saying, okay, I'll tell the story. So, but 8 years, long time. Okay, so I told you about researching the land. Then I started about how cool our researching the family. Then all these figures, public figures came up. And so here's one of them. Commodore Alexander James Dallas. Has anyone ever heard of him? That's who Dallas is really named after. A lot of Dallasites will say it's named after George Mifflin Dallas, who was vice president, but he was not vice president until way later than the settlement of Dallas was there. This guy was a rock star in Texas. He was head of the United States. He was real high up in the United States Navy. If you know much about Texas history too, he was also a big hand in that. And actually, he's why General Houston won the Battle of San Jacinto, because if you know about the Invincible and the pocket, the interception of Santa Anna's munitions and got them to Sam Houston, that was really what pushed us in being able to win the Texas, and nobody really knows about that. And then there's also something about Tampico I talk a little bit about, where he saved a lot of Texians' lives that they were going to kill because we had Santa Anna. So that's all in there too. But he is from a very wealthy, well-to-do, left his family at a young age at 14, much to his parents' chagrin. They were society, Boston society, and good friends with George Washington. This is his dad and his mom. He definitely had a different plan for his son, and Mabel Gilbert's father, the same thing. So I think that they were kind of kindred spirits that way. But you can't make this stuff up when you hear about these people in their lives. Good friends, lots of letters between he and Andrew Jackson. And guess whose plantation was right next to Mabel Gilbert's plantation? Andrew Jackson's, the Hermitage.
Oh, really?
He was born, Mabel was born in 1797. It says Eastern North Carolina, which became Tennessee. So Nashville, Tennessee. So, and not far from there is where Andrew Jackson's, the Hermitage, is.
I think you are gonna have to do this twice. Because you're telling so much
I know,
that
it's
I'm
so
not
fast.
absorbing it all.
Well, when you read the book, you'll learn a lot of it. If you read the book. But you know how there's lots of stories, shows out about the wives of New York City, here's the wives of Dallas. Okay, so Alexander James Dallas anyway. So this is what is so interesting. These aren't just the normal pioneer people. So Richard Warsom Meade was his first father-in-law. His daughter, this is Commodore Alexander James Dallas's first wife, Henrietta. I always wanted to know if that had anything to do with this. And I don't know if y'all know that much about Clay and why it was named Henrietta, but I always wondered about that. But he was a very famous, he was a naval person. He was crazy about art, very expensive art, and traveled internationally like Commodore Alexander James Dallas did. They knew each other that way. George Gordon Meade, do we have any Civil War history people in here? Anyway, he's a huge Civil War figure, very famous figure. So that was his first wife. She died in 1831. Then Commodore Dallas married Mary Bird Willis, who is in the lineage of George Washington's, and just really, and her dad was high up in the U.S. Navy too. But the son, Trevion, which you can't make this up. I mean, it's just crazy. He studied at an Ivy League school, but then went to Paris to visit his aunt, Princess Murat. So his aunt was Princess Murat. And so this was Commodore Dallas's this is his son, which he never met. He died in Peru before he met him. And then Mabel Gilbert's 21st child, he had 18 live to adulthood, but this 21st child was born after he died too. And she left Wichita County because of the Indians. But anyway, I found out all this stuff and I'm just like, this is crazy. And so thus I did all the research and then I decided to tell the story. These are images that I found in Natchez, Mississippi when I was researching. And in the book, that's part of the historical fiction, everything I read said Mabel Gilbert, his enslaved force was uncharacteristically loyal, and he treated them more like family members than enslaved people. And it's my belief, and I talk about it in the book, that he came when it was still Mexico to set his enslaved people free. And that's why he left the plantation, left a very, very well-to-do plantation to head west. He imported transported goods for the plantation, and he was a steamboat captain. That's why I have this on here. But I found these are not of the Gilberts or anything. These are just Mississippi Natchez in about the same time period. But while I was there researching, and wherever I go, and I'll show you some that I researched here at Clay County, I just go to, where's your number one book? Where's your oldest book? I'll just look for it for Gilbert's, and that's what I did when I was in Natchez, and I went, and I found out, so his two older brothers were also steamboat captains or riverboat captains, and there were two different lawsuits in there for Wilson and Thomas, his older brothers, who were steamboat captains, where someone brought charges against them because they helped set their enslaved people free. So I just don't feel like I'm far off in telling that story. And so I've loved finding that because that gave more credence to what I thought. So this is a steamboat from about the same time period. That's a ferry that went across the Mississippi about the same time. But this is the route that the Gilberts took. So the first place he bought property, Maybelle Gilbert bought property, was in Arkansas, not far from Hot Springs. And then he did some work on the Great Southwest Trail. He helped with lots of roads. He helped with the road for Andrew Jackson, military roads, because he knew the Indians so well and he traversed it so well that a lot of times they took Indian trails and made them, military roads. First, so it was close to Hot Springs County. Then he went to Bailey in Fannin County, current day Bonham, on Bodart Creek, and I just spoke there last week, and that was so interesting. They called it Camp Gilbert because people would go there, and then Fort English was built after that. They'd go there when the Indians would come for raids. Then from there, he went to Fort English. Then John Neely Bryan came and recruited him to go to Dallas. Oh, that's after he went Tarrant County. He became a Texas Ranger, and that's about the same, right after, Cynthia Ann Parker got abducted, and they were, it was a lot going on. But it wasn't just the Indians. There was also a judge. I was just talking to him in Bonham. I found a letter. And each presentation, I try to do more that's kind of your history. And when I was there, I found where there was a judge in Bonham that had gotten a fine horse, a very good horse, and that he said he found or something. And Mabel knew that it was one of his Indian friends. He made the judge return it to his Indian friend. So I mean, there were things going on both ways, and he was just that kind of man. And then Birdville, which is current day Tarrant County around there, Arlington, Bird's Fort. I've spoken there. They're about to build this huge community center there. Sailed up the Trinity River for the John Neely Bryan settlement. Wife named Dallas. After 2 years there, because of the Peters Colony, they left the Peters Colony. You know anything about the Peters Colony? It was a bunch of investment people from New York and from London that were selling area in the Texas, and they kept changing the parameters, and he would have been like a squatter. And also they had a big rain that year and it washed out his watermelon patch. And also he had worked on the military road close by there and found out that because he already had land in Texas, he wasn't going to get any more there, so he just left there. But he's the only person that has 3 creeks in Texas named after him: Gilbert Creek in Dallas, Gilbert Creek in Fannin County, Bonham, and Gilbert Creek in Wichita County. Now, Stephen F. Austin has 3 bodies of water named after him, but not 3 creeks. So then he went on and had in Grayson County, which I graduated from Sherman High School, had a steam mill there. Very much so an entrepreneur, Maybelle Gilbert. He founded copper on my property and sent it off to New York in 1856, 57. And I have all the paperwork from that. If you go to the U.S. government, it's on my website too, that he filed it with the U.S. government as a copper, find. And he was just way before his time. He was a self-proclaimed mineralogist, an entrepreneur, just fought for what was right. Then from Wichita, because of Indians, back to Montague, Wichita, Montague. And then his wife ended up in Cook County, where they had the 21st baby, and when he died in 1870, after he died. So lots of footprints in Texas. So this is on our property. You can see there's a turkey here. This is that last snow that we had in an old barn that's on there. That's me on the Red River. I kayak on Gilbert Creek in the Red River. But you really feel like you've gone back in time when you're on our property, because nothing really, it hadn't been developed, So I talk a lot of the book about, has anyone ever heard about a parliament of owls? A parliament of owls? So I went down on our property and there's a circle, about 10 owls, and they were just sitting in a circle looking at each other. And I was like, and of course Google, I just Googled, why do owl, and they said, it's a parliament of owls. And it's like they were holding court, but I talk about that in my book. I talk about that in my book, and here's another owl, and this one was just staring at me, and we just looked at each other for about 15 minutes.
Wow.
But do y'all have the migration of the butterflies that come through here at all?
They used to a lot.
Yeah, right. We have springs at the base of this. There's natural springs on our property, and so I wanted to show you this video. If you can, I don't know if you can see them or not.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Oh,
thousands of them on some years, and they just clump on a tree, and it just makes it look like it's alive and breathing. I mean, just thousands and thousands of them, and usually they always stop on our property. And I was going to read one section from my book about this as that video, if y'all will allow me. This is right after Charity, his first wife, died, and the daughter knew he had been sad and wanted to cheer him up, and so she wanted him to show him these butterflies. So Louisa interrupted his thoughts with her own. Papa, look how they flutter on the breeze. They're so graceful. They seem to paint wherever they go with hues of orange and black. Mama used to tell me they travel far away to find warmer weather. Mabel thought again that he could identify with these delicate creatures. Their resilience was a testament to the enduring spirit of wanderlust that also pulsed deep within him. Louisa brought him back again. I knew you would love seeing them. Don't they look like the inside of my kaleidoscope toy? Mabel laughed. Why, yes, they do. Your mother told me that you like to catch them and save them so you could see them later. You sure do love them, don't you? She looked disappointingly at him. That was when I was little, Pa, and did not know any better. You know Sally. Well, Sally is Henry, his enslaved friends. They did what was called Sabbath school, very into education. Mabel helped Henry learn to read, and Henry helped Mabel learn how to live off the land because his dad wanted him to be an aristocrat, didn't want his hands to get dirty, didn't want him to do all that, and so I wanted to give you a little bit of that background. Sally and I read about the monarchs and their migration. That's a big word I learned last year. She told me that it was selfish of me to catch these butterflies. She said if I caught them, they would not realize their dream and get safely to warmer weather. She told me that if I really loved them, I would let them be. Enjoy them for the time that they bless us with their beautiful presence and keep the image of them in my mind and heart. Ever since I've been letting them be, it seems like more and more of them come back each year to this spot. You've been quiet and sad, Papa. I wanted these beautiful monarchs to cheer you up. She was shocked when she noticed tears in his eyes. Mabel smiled and tried to reassure her that they were happy tears. Then he said, Darling Louisa, I have been constantly praying for God for a sign lately. I have a big decision to make, and I want you to know that God has spoken through you, my angelic daughter, through you and his exquisite nature. Thank you. Then he wrapped her in his arms and thank God too. So he struggled internally. Yes, he separated Henry and his family from the plantation, but when they got here, Texas became, a state, and then it soon became a slave state. And so he ended up having to pay taxes on it, but he felt like it was safer for them to stay with him because so many freed people of color would move and they'd be captured, excuse me, or sent back into slavery with someone else. And so he was really battling did he really want them to feel protected, or was he being selfish because he just loved them and wanted them to stay? And so he'd been thinking about that for so long, and Rachel, it's not his second wife yet, had means and had someone to transfer them to the east, and he had a decision to make, and so Louisa helped him make the decision because of the modern monarch, excuse me. And so that's when the historical fiction part of it, that conversation is just for me being out in nature on our property. Excuse me. All right, so that's the end of my presentation, but thank you so much for your time and for coming out. Are there any questions that you have?
More.
Well, I do actually have more.
We do have,
I've got more. So this is what I found.
I do want to tell them,
Okay.
Deb, that we do have laying around some pictures of the Gilbert
Yes.
from Clay County and some of their the ties. And Morris, the guy with the face
Had his face
disfigurement,
shut off, yep.
yeah, it tells how he moved to Buffalo Springs with his family,
Yeah.
and that's where they connected. And then WC was telling me all kinds of. I was in the middle of TJ Maxx when he was telling me all this. Had nothing to write with, you know. So hopefully when he comes back, he'll tell some more stories because he did tell me today about. I guess it was Mabel that built. I don't know if it was a trough or something that was trying to keep the buffalo from
He did,
coming
and it's
onto
in the book too. So
Okay.
he built it like a moat
Yeah.
around his crops because the buffalo were so plentiful, they were ruining his crops.
Mm.
And so they worked hard on this moat around their property and still didn't keep them out. But yeah, that's definitely a.
And one more thing I want to say, David,
Yeah,
and then
go ahead.
I'll hush up. Because these people know, most of them know Chiquita Graves. And a couple of Sundays ago, she came over and brought stuff. I don't know where she has it all in her house, but she brings out all this stuff occasionally. And if you go to her house, you won't notice any of this stuff. But it was a map, and of course, with me kind of helping and getting ready for tonight, I've been looking and reading some more about the Gilberts and all. But sure enough, we opened up this map that had been Allen's, and it has all the different surrounding counties. But then it has right there, and I showed her a while ago, that he was the first settler. Yeah, and it has his name, Mabel Gilbert, on this map that Chiquita brought just out of nowhere within the last couple of weeks. So, yeah.
Yes, please. I'll move all these cords. Come look. She's done a great job on a board here.
Well,
Describing that.
how many of these people were there all together? How many kids did?
He had 21
He had
with two
21
different wives,
kids.
18 that lived to adulthood. So it's just, you think about that, and there's a timeline up there too that you can pass around or look at when we're through formally talking. But you think about that and them having families and how, you know, there's a lady named Lois Gilbert. I travel up and down 82 all the time because my mom lives in Sherman. And I always look for Gilbert names, and there's some business there, Lois Gilbert, and her husband, he's passed away just in the last year, or I would have had him come to in the St. Joe area.
In Oconee, we had the Gilbert's department store.
Oh, did you?
Oh, did you?
Atlas Gilbert. Atlas. Was his name.
Atlas?
And his mother lived in a fine two-story white colonial like house,
Oh, wow.
catty corner to where I was living at one time.
Huh. Well, if you know any of their family, make sure and tell them about the book. Like I said, I had someone call me from Louisiana last week that's a great-great-grandchild that saw something in the Dallas Morning. I mean, it's just so fun, and there's so little out there. And in fact, one of the reasons why I wrote this book, when I taught school with Barbara, I taught a little girl named Lisa Eidelbach, and her grandmother was a author. Oh, it's in here somewhere. Anyway, she wrote a book about the tales of the Red River Valley, and the first chapter is about Mabel Gilbert, and it's titled "A Curious Mystery," because there's these little stories, but people didn't put them all together, and that's what I felt like I did. I weaved them together. Hey, not
That's all right.
just breathe. I'm talking too much.
That's what happens to me when I talk too much.
Yeah. All right. So this is what I found. I told you that I found at the Clay County. So I just went to the #1 book from probate minutes, and this is what I'm still looking for is will, because I have not been able to find his probated will or the probate minutes from it, because that would answer a lot of questions, especially in Wichita County. What happened to those 4,000 acres once he lived? I know Rachel sold one bit to Dan Wagner for $1 an acre, so he had 183 acres of it, and I think that might have been the Perkins Scout Camp area. I've traced back, but a couple of the county courthouses have burned down, and so I don't know if it's lost in here, but this is what I found in here, if you can see it, Morris Gilbert, see it right here, Morris Gilbert, 699, to Roberta Thorpe. Anyway, it's just, it won't make a lot of sense to y'all, but this is some, and I thought maybe some of these names might look, is it Thor Roberts? And these are all just district court things that, with Morris Gilbert in it from Clay County. Just information that came up that I found through research there that you could look through if you wanted to. This is the, let's see. This is the whole deed that I had a little snippet of in there from when it was Clay County, when it was still Clay County, from Cook County. And then this is a slideshow of the book that they have, that if you did want to know any of the names that this Cornelius member did. And so this is Rachel Gilbert right here, and she's got her picture up there. Anyway, Pace the Lyles are in here, if you wanted to look through any of those, but it's also in that book right there.
Did you ever come across any of the pictures of his first wife? I never could find
Charity?
it.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
No.
But-
And I've been
but when I
looking for
think
all
about
these
the
years,
time-
and this is the first one that I found of him. So he wasn't about, he didn't want to be in the spotlight. You know, he rubbed elbows with Sam Houston. I know, I mean, Holland Coffee, so interesting, this story. And Sophia Coffee, has anyone ever heard? It's where Lake Texoma is now. If you look at the list of who he was a Texas Ranger with, I mean, it was Montague, it was Tarrant, it was all those big names in Texas. He rubbed elbows with all of them, but he just, he wasn't in the limelight, you know. I mean, he was a commissioner, and he did hold like local positions, but just wasn't, you know, wasn't a Daniel Boone or Daniel Boone wrote a book about himself, didn't he? Isn't he the one who went into politics? Was it Daniel Boone, or was it
Davy Crockett.
Davy Crockett? Is who I'm thinking about. I read his book, yeah. And so he didn't do anything like that to kind of tell his history. So I've got a couple of letters from family members that I developed a lot of the story from, and then a lot from the Beeman and the Bryan families, from correspondences from them. But it was just so early.
Old ladies we knew that lived over close to right here, this one named Gilbert. No.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we thank y'all for coming this
Yeah.
evening. And we do have some refreshments and waters in the kitchen while y'all want to continue to visit. As